Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and yes, you bet I am very excited to be here with you today. I'm just, just this beautiful present moment is what I'm excited about, really, and to be spending this beautiful present moment talking to you about how to ground yourself into this beautiful present moment is just bringing me such joy and such excitement. So here we are. So before I go, I know yesterday I made a couple of announcements at the very end of the podcast. I just want to make a couple of announcements in the beginning of the podcast. So for all of you who hung around to see the end, I apologize for repeating myself. But for all of you who did not hear to the end, I want to make a couple of announcements. And so so first of all, I know I've mentioned it before, but this meeting that we have on Wednesday evenings, I mean, folks, it is so cool. It is really, really so cool. I mean, we have this great group of about, it's like 8 or 10 people who show up week in and week out. People are so open, communicative, compassionate, kind to one another. It's really, really just amazing. And so it's a virtual meeting. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. Okay. It happens at 7 p.m. in the Mountain Time Zone, which is 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and 8 p.m. in the Midwest. And I can't tell you how amazing it is. Now, somebody told me the other day that I'm a master guided meditator or, master guiding meditation. I don't know that that's true. Okay. But that's what the person said. I'm glad he thinks so. I hope you'll think so too. I've been getting a lot of practice every single week. I'm doing guided meditation, so it's feeling very good. And yeah, I like to think that I know what I'm doing. It's not my first meditation here, and so it's a wonderful, like, about a half hour of meditation, and then it's a discussion, and the discussions are just so amazing. I mean, really, it's it's not a coaching thing, right? I'm not giving out coaching or anything, but what certainly I have done in the past though, is I've set up, external meetings with some of the people who was like, oh, I could help this person. Let's talk. And it's coming back, oh my gosh, the journaling practice you told me to do has changed everything for me. Oh my gosh, the compassion practice that I'm doing changed everything, so there is coaching there too, and it's all, technically it's by donation, but practically it's pretty much free because there's not a whole lot of donating going on, which is okay. I mean, it'd be nice to, because it does require us to spend a little bit, to make this happen. So we do appreciate whatever donations come in, but it's not something that's required. So certainly, just show up. Really, just show up. Okay, I'm going to put the link in the description to register for this thing, and then once you register for it, you'll get notifications through Meetup in your email or however you set it up, and so it's not something that you have to, it's not like it's going to be much easier to just get into that, kind of set yourself up with the Meetup, and so I'll put that link. Hopefully you make it. I would love to see you there. And seriously, I mean, because it's a Zoom call, there's literally no capacity issues. Like, we could have hundreds of people in this meeting if we needed to, right? It might get a little tricky in the discussion part, might have to create a little extra space for that. But yeah, there's no there's no requirements. You don't need to know anything. You don't need to have anything. You don't even need to turn on your camera. It's okay. There's plenty of people who do not turn on their camera. Show up and see what it's like. That's all I recommend, just and it's funny, I just actually got done talking to somebody about potential, and the idea that this whole universe, right, is nothing but an arising potential. Right. And so a lot of times, what we do is, and this is perfectly natural and normal for us to do this, right? It's a function of our brain to try to determine, okay, is this thing going to be safe? Like, this thing that I'm about to do, am I safe here or am I in danger? Right. That's what your brain is constantly trying to figure out. Right. And so it's constantly looking into the future. Well, what it's doing is it's creating a future based on its experiences of the past. Right. So it's saying, okay, every other time I've been in this situation, something positive has happened, so now I feel good. But every time I've been in this situation, something negative happened, so now I don't feel good. I've never been in this situation before, so now I'm afraid of what might happen, right? And that's the trick, right? Because or that's where we can trick ourselves in a very positive way, right? Because that action of saying like, okay, just because I don't know what's going to happen, that it's automatically going to be something negative, right? That's putting us out of balance. And that's what we're going to talk about today, right? That's creating a disintegration in our brain in a lot of ways, right? Or at least it's contributing to a disintegration of our brain, right? And so what's more, pardon me, what's much more healthy for us to do and much more realistic and much more, actual and the way things actually work, right, is to, instead of going through that process of saying, okay, well, if I go to this guided meditation, it's going to be, I might be embarrassed, or I might be uncomfortable, or I don't want to turn on my camera. I don't want to, I don't want people to see my home. Whatever stuff might go through your mind in that moment, right? I invite you to instead look at it in the opposite way, right? Which is to say that I really don't know what's going to happen. Right now, there might be certain boundaries, which is fine, right? Like I don't want people to see my home. I don't want people to see me on camera. I'm not comfortable with that. Okay, that's a boundary. And that's a boundary that will define to a certain extent the potential, right? It's going to, narrow down that potential a little bit, right? Which is okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the idea though is to go into something with the openness, right? Of going into, like, again, a guided meditation, maybe you've never been to a guided meditation before, right? Or maybe you have been to a guided meditation before. Either way, you have no idea what my guided meditation is going to be like until you experience it, right? So therefore, it's nothing but potential right now, right? And you will never, a great way to examine the potential and to live the potential, experience the potential, is to go into a novel experience like a guided meditation that you've never gone to before. And it doesn't have to just be a guided meditation, right? I'll get to other modalities in a second, but go into something and just go into it with the understanding that you're going to experience potential. Okay. What that means is, like, when we come into the guided meditation, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to come in without expectations and without judgments of any kind. I'm just going to come in. I'm going to watch what happens. I'm going to see the potential arise, right? Or going to see the actuality arise from the sea of potential, right? What that means, right, is that, I don't know how I'm going to feel, right? But I'm going to pay attention to how I feel in this meditation. And therefore, I'm going to experience that potential arising, right? Or again, to be specific and accurate, I'm going to experience the actualization arising from the field of potential, okay? Now, I have a client who I work with, and I'm so fortunate to work with this man. He's a brilliant, just awesome dude. And I'm just so honored. Like every week I get to meet with him. I I can't believe I'm being paid for this, because I love to talk to this guy. It's just so amazing. Every week I come away with just this, and this happens with every single client I have. Like, that's how it works, right? But anyway, this one person I just met with a little while ago, we were talking about this potential, and he came up with this amazing idea, right? So it turns out that he's alone for the weekend, and he's going to, and this is something he thought about doing before, and he suggested, I was like, gosh, that is the best idea. He's going to go knock on somebody's door in the neighborhood and just see what happens, right? As a means of experimenting with potential, right? Like when you go knock on that door, right? You have no idea what the person's going to be. He lives in a new neighborhood, this guy. And if you were going to do it, I would suggest go to another neighborhood. Go to someplace where you don't know the people, right? And knock on the door. And that's the field of potential, right? As you're knocking on that door, that's the field of potential. There is literally, it's not quite endless potential or infinite potential, but it's almost, right? It's literally like there's no way for you to know who's going to open that door, what they're going to say, and how you're going to interact with them. There's no way for you to know that ahead of time. So therefore, it is the field of potential that you're entering into. And once you knock on that door, now you're going to find the actualization of the potential, right? So that means that whoever answers that door, they're either going to be a man or a woman. They're going to be old. They're going to be young. They're either going to be happy. They're going to be sad. They're going to be dressed or undressed. Who knows, right? Like those are the different actualities, right? But there's no way walking up to somebody's door saying, okay, it's going to be a 55-year-old woman and she's going to be wearing a bathrobe. There's no way for you to know that, right? That's a complete guess. You might be right, but you don't know that, right? So you only know the actualization only happens when the door opens. So play with that a little bit, sit with that idea and let me know if there's anything you want to talk about with that idea, because quite frankly, it's an amazing practice. And I think I'm going to try it too, because it's, not only is it an amazing practice, but it's also, not only is it an amazing practice in the sense of kind of feeling into this field of potential and seeing the actualization from the potential, but it's also a great practice in compassion, right? Because you're doing it for just for the sake of interacting, and that's always a compassionate thing, right? You're taking your time and you're saying, hey, I'd like to meet you. Would you like to meet me? Right? That's an act of kindness and compassion. And as I told you the other day, that alone is going to work towards an integrated brain, and it's going to work towards a healthy brain and a healthy body and healthy relationships and all kinds of healthy stuff. Okay. So think about it. Just, whether you try to do the experiment or not, this is not the only way to experience the field of potential. And in fact, mindfulness is practicing dwelling in the field of potential, right? Because when we practice mindfulness, what we're doing is we're practicing being open and receptive to whatever arises in the present moment, right? Which again, that's the actualization that arises from the potential, which the potential in any given moment in many ways is very close to infinite, right? It's not really, because like I'm sitting here in Denver, like I'm in a certain place, so there's only so many, like it's not going to snow, right? So we know that, right? Things like that, right? So, but really to be able to sense that wide openness of the sea of potential, all right? So play with that, sit with that, and contemplate that. Let me know what you think. Tell me if you have any questions, or tell me what feedback, what came to you as you thought about that. I'm really, really curious. And so today I want to talk about something that kind of ties into this. Sorry, my throat's a little dry here. We had a ton of rain last night, so I think there's a lot of pollen, and the guys were just outside mowing the grass outside here and stuff. So I think there's a lot of pollen in the air. So my my allergies, my body's reacting to that. So pardon my scratchy voice. But something that's kind of tied into the whole concept of the field of potential and the actualization arising in any given moment, right? Is the sense of balance, the sense of equanimity, okay? The sense of integration, right? As I've talked about the other day, integration is, in many ways, when we are in a place of integration, what we're doing is we're really dwelling in that sea of potential, right? We're really in a place where anything might happen, right? And so I want to talk though about balance and about the importance of balance, right? This today's episode is brought to you by, or I should say, is inspired by yet another person I'm lucky enough to meet with, and this person I've talked about quite a few times before. He's a brilliant individual. He's just a wonderful, wonderful human. His initials are JC, so you know who you are, my friend. I don't want to, I don't know. I think he's told me I can mention his name, but I don't know. I don't feel comfortable doing it. So JC, all right. So JC yesterday told me about this concept that I believe he took it from his grandfather, and the concept is the scale of life, as he put it to me. And so the scale of life, from what JC was explaining, right, is the concept that, like, for every, and as JC's grandfather explained to him, for every frustration in your life, or for every difficulty in your life, right, you should try to have something that is pleasurable, right, or easy. Right. And so kind of looking at, like, okay, if I have 10 things to do that I don't want to do, let me find 10 things that I want to do and do those also, right? To create this level of balance. Now, again, this is a person, writing like 100 years ago now, right? Like, or 80 years ago or something like that, right? 70 something, his grandfather, he's passed, he's, lived a long time ago. And so, but it's dramatically accurate to what we know about neuroscience. And that's pretty amazing, right? So it reminds me of something that Barbara Friedrichsen talks about a lot, right? So Barbara Friedrichsen is a wonderful, wonderful human being also. I again would love to get to know her sometime, just not in a weird way, but just like, she's amazing. Like I was saying the other day about Dan Siegel, right? Back in the day, I would have said, if you pick one woman in the world that you would just want to meet over anyone else, I was never into like the supermodels and stuff, but mine would have been like, maybe Joan Jett, or like Stevie Nicks, or some musical person, or maybe a writer, maybe Maya Angelou, or somebody, somebody who's an influential woman, like in a, kind of a creative way, but now there's no question. It's either Barbara Friedrichsen, or Tara Brach, or oh gosh, I'm so sorry, Sharon Salzberg. One of these people, right? Like, these are the people I would love to just spend time with and just talk to them, just listen to them, and just feel their energy, And so anyway, Dr. Barbara Friedrichsen, she has this pretty famous concept that's actually been kind of challenged, and apparently there was some problems with the math with this, okay, but Barbara Friedrichsen has come out even after the criticism of the math, which was really from her colleague, right? That the two of them kind of came up with this thing called the positivity ratio. And she's since come out after the math was debunked, if you will. She has come out and still demonstrated how there's a lot of validity to this concept of a ratio of well-being, or positive emotions, right? And so using the math just as a sort of a general guide, but understanding the math doesn't really line up, right? But there still is a ratio, right? And so the ratio is the important part, right? Because the ratio is the balance point, right? And what Barbara Friedrichsen has said, for years now, right? It's that, you need, and again, this is the ratio that they came up with, so we're going to be a little loose with the math. We're going to just use this as an example, right? That you need 3 positive emotions to balance out every negative emotion you have, right? In order to feel balanced, right? And to feel well, right? It's like a 3-to-1 ratio, right? And so that it's really important, right? Because, a lot of, when you talk about like toxic positivity, right? It's about like, oh, just look at everything in a positive way, right? Just eschew all negative emotions and just feel positive emotions, and therefore your vibrational elevation will manifest an abundant life, right? There's books, there's movies, there's podcasts, there's all kinds of people out there saying that all the time, right? I don't know that feels thin to me, right? And as Barbara Friedrichsen, actually, she was quoting somebody else who she had explained her positivity ratio to, like somebody in a TED Talk or something, who gave her the illustration of a sailboat. A sailboat, if you look at a sailboat, right, the part that's above the water, right, is the sort of the hull and the cabin and the mast and the sails, right? And you need all that to make the boat go, right? But if that's all you had, right, if the water line all was a flat bottom, a sailboat wouldn't work that way. Right now, a motorboat can work that way because you're propelling the motor. You're using the propulsion as a directional thing, right? So in other words, you have a motor on the back of the boat. If you turn the motor this way, it's going to push things in a certain way, right? It's going to create a steering. So you don't need what you have on a sailboat, which is called a keel. Right. And so on a sailboat, because you don't have a propulsion, right, you have the wind is pushing the sail. If you don't have that keel, the boat's just going to move sideways with the wind. You're not going to be able to control the boat in the wind. Right. You're going to be, you're only going to be able to go a certain direction that the wind is pushing you. Right. So in order to be able to, work around and even go into the wind to a certain extent, it requires this keel. Right. And so the keel could be seen as your negative emotions. Right. Whereas your positive emotions are all the stuff that the beautiful sail, the big cabin, the spot where you can sit out in the sun and, enjoy the view and stuff like that. Right. And so again, without some of that negativity, life is very thin. Life is out of balance. Right. But to be sure, too much negativity, and I'm sure most of us have experienced that at times, right? There's moments where we become too negative and then life feels just heavy and just like what am I doing here? So the idea then becomes a balance, right? But it's not an indiscriminate balance. Right. Again, it's not saying that, okay, I have, one happy emotion, one sad emotion, right? It's a certain, equilibrium, a certain equanimity that we find in the balance, right? There's another old story that I wanted to share with you about this that it's kind of a different side of the idea of balance, right? And kind of more related to the scale of life that JC's grandfather was saying rather than the positivity ratio. But Barbara Friedrichsen, anytime you get a chance to bring up Barbara Friedrichsen, you bring up Barbara Friedrichsen. Pardon me, I have a lisp all of a sudden. I'm so turned around. So for all of you on the podcast, I just made like a fanning my face thing, like I'm flushed or blushing or something, but I'm not. I'm just kidding. Anyway, apparently there's a story that was going around. I first heard this story many years ago, but apparently there was a philosophy professor in college one time who had one of those big mayonnaise bottles, like the really big one that you get at like Costco or Sam's Club, right? The big Mondo, bigger than you would ever need, right? Of a mayonnaise jar, right? And it was empty and it was cleaned out, right? So it was an empty, clean, huge bottle, right? And so what the professor had a number of like buckets on his desk, right? One bucket was a bucket of golf balls, right? And he poured the golf balls into this mayonnaise jar. They kind of rose to the top. They basically filled up the bottle. And he said, now is this jar full? And, a few of the students said yes. Some said, I don't know. Some said, no, I'm sure. And so he had another jar that was filled with pebbles, right? Little stones. And he poured those in, and those like went in between all the golf balls and fell into the mayonnaise jar. And it seemed to fill it up, right? Again, a little more full, but seemed to be full. Like the pebbles went all the way to the top of the jar. And so now the teacher said, now is the jar full? And more people said, yeah, now it's full. And so now the third little bucket that the professor had on his desk was filled with sand. And then he dumped the sand in. And the sand, of course, finds all the little empty spaces in between all the little pebbles and fills everything in completely, right? Now he says, now is the jar full, and now everybody's like, yes, now it's definitely full. Look, there's nothing else you can fit in there, right? So the lesson here, right, is that these three different, the sand, the pebbles, and the golf balls all represented, kind of items in our life, right? So the golf balls represent the really important stuff, right? Your family, your happiness, your mindfulness, your compassion, right? The pebbles, they represented, your job, the kind of stuff that you have to do in your life, right? Going and getting food and cooking food, and just kind of the basic, necessities of life, right? Just the things that you have to do to get through life, right? And then the sand represented, watching Netflix or going out with your friends, and kind of, all the stuff that happens in between, right? And even not just Netflix, but even like tying your shoes and washing the dishes, and doing all this other stuff, right, in your life, right? And so the lesson here that this philosophy teacher was conveying is that if we put the sand or the pebbles in first, right? If we pay too much attention to the little stuff in our lives, or our job, or our kind of, the stuff that's not that important, right? If we pay attention to that stuff, well, then there's no room in our life for the important stuff, right? And so the idea is then, and again, going back to JC's, JC's grandfather's, notion of the scale, right? Is that if you put too much of that, mundane, well, not mundane, but like, ineffectual stuff in your life, right? Like not the stuff that makes you passionate, not the stuff that makes you happy, not the stuff that, that brings you joy, right? But the drudgery of life, right? If you put all that stuff in there first, if you pile that stuff onto the scale, then you don't have room in your life now for the important stuff, right? And so this is, again, whether we talk about it on an emotional level or we talk about it on a relational level, right? The point is that, like we could look at, to bring this back into the concept of practice and mindfulness, right? We could say that, to jump out of bed in the morning and just rush into the day, right? To just go, get dressed and, pour some coffee down your throat and stuff a bagel in your mouth and just run out into the day and, work, get your, do your career thing. I just described my life for 20 years, right? Then there's no balance, right? Like all work, no play makes art a dull boy, right? That's the thing, right? So that we need to stake some time out for ourselves before we get into the rush of the day, right? So that's why I always tell people, like, do your meditation in the morning, and then set timers throughout the day that when this timer goes off, that's the time that I pause and I practice some compassion, right? Kind of, creating space, holding space, putting the golf balls in first so that you have the space to do the things that make you happy, that bring you joy, that bring you well-being. And before you jump into the stuff that, quite frankly, like the stress and the striving and the difficulty of work, that stuff is not making you healthier. Sure, you need to do it, right? We need to pay for our bills and everything else. So we all have to work, right? We all have to do something, right? But most of the time, that work is not something that's benefiting us on a health, mentally, emotionally. Some of us are lucky enough to be doing something that they love to do, but most are not, and that's okay, right? You can't base your life on that either, right? It's about creating a balance, right? And that's what they talk about, like the work-life balance, right? That's this buzz term out there now, right? But it's very real, and that's where we have to make a commitment to our own well-being, right? And making that commitment to our well-being means, going out working with a coach, right? Going to a meditation every week, without fail. Like, that's important, right? That's a golf ball. I got to do that, right? And then just very basically, just, doing your daily practice, right? Like setting aside 10 or 20 minutes in the morning, 10 or 20 minutes in the evening, and a few minutes here and there throughout the day, but doing it with intention. Don't just, it doesn't work if we just say, oh, I'm sure at some point today I'll get to do some practice. And, what happens is 4 or 5 days later, you say, oh my gosh, I haven't practiced in a week. What happened? right? So we got to be intentional about it. We got to set the times, and we got to adhere to those times. And it doesn't have to be, zero tolerance, right? Like I always tell people, I often use, as you can see, I'm using my cell phone technology right now to time this video, which I'm coming up on my limit. But but I love using technology because it's something that's so, ubiquitous in our life, right? Like it's pernicious in our life, right? So let's use it. Let's harness the power of this, right? So a lot of times I'm saying, like, set a timer. When the timer goes off, you pause, you do some practice, right? But that doesn't mean that, if the timer goes off 8 times during the day and on time number 4 and number 6, you were in the middle of a meeting, I'm not asking you to just, tell the person, oh, wait, I got to do my practice here. Sorry, boss, you got to give me a minute. No, of course not. Of course not, right? And that's okay, right? Like that's part of the fluidity that we're looking for too, right? And the adaptability, right? So when you get out of that meeting, try to do your practice. And if you miss that hour, you miss that hour. It's okay, right? But setting it up in such a way that you put your golf balls in the jar first, right? That's the idea. So anyway, I hope that that's interesting to you. I hope that it's helpful to you. And if you would like to understand more about this, then I invite you to reach out and let me know. And by the way, I should have said this in the beginning. I didn't. I just started a Facebook group. I got one person signed up, but come on in. Okay, I'll put the link in the description for that too. Joining the Facebook group can be a great way to you never know who you're going to meet, right? You never know who you're going to find in there. And I'll be throwing some tips and some doing some lives and doing some, even maybe some coaching in there. I mean, it's going to get great. But you got to come in. You got to do it. You got to set that intention. You got to say, okay, for my well-being, I'm going to take this action. I'm going to take the action before my life is filled up with all the stuff that just gets in the way. All right? All right, everybody. Wishing you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Hope you're all doing great. See you soon.